Hello everybody, it is Nicole from iiKiui, where I want to help you improve your art. Today I'll be teaching you how to improve your line art. If you feel like you've heard this from me before, it's probably because you have. I did a video on this in the past and it was a two-parter, but I never released the second part, so I thought that I would just redo the whole thing and combine it to make 10 tips instead of 5 each. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop right into those tips. First, you want to find a pen you like. To do so, you need to experiment. You can use a fine liner or a brush pen, whichever works best for you. I've tried many different brands and pens, and usually my favorites change depending on how I'm feeling, but I have a few that I like. I'll leave links to those in the description. What I like to do is to take my pen and draw a couple of lines on a piece of paper. How does the pen feel? How much pressure are you using? Do you like how the lines it makes looks? I try to answer these questions when deciding on what pen to use. For example, if I want to add a lot of line variance, I'll choose my brush pens. On the other hand, if I want more control on line width, I will reach for my fine liners. Ultimately, it's personal preference, but I would suggest trying different pens and you might even find a new favorite. Many of us want to dive straight into the line art, but it's important to practice first. Before I start my line art, I would take a scrap piece of paper and make a few strokes on that. I'm testing for several things. First, I'm looking to see if there's any residue on the tip. This can really mess up your line art if you're not careful. Next, I'm testing how much control I have over the pen. Typically, I do this for brush pens because depending on the amount of pressure, you can get very different lines. And lastly, I'm practicing the strokes I will be making in the drawing. This just gets my hand used to the motion and helps it become more comfortable with making that mark. Transferring your image to a clean page will help you in the end. I always take this step because 1, I don't want to lose the original sketch and risk messing it up, and 2, you don't have to erase all the lines when you're finished with the drawing and risk wrinkling the page. In many of my recent videos, you'll often see a drawing already transferred onto a clean page. Typically, my sketches are on printer paper, so I transfer them onto watercolor paper or Bristol board depending on the medium I'm using. When transferring your image, tape it down to the paper so it doesn't move around. I use masking tape because it holds the paper still, but it won't rip when you take it off. Next, I use my light pad to transfer the image, but if you don't have that, try using a window in the daytime. If you do this, tape your page to the window so your arms don't get tired from holding it up. And lastly, I use several mediums to make the clean sketch. Sometimes I'll use a mechanical pencil, but if I don't want it to smudge, I will use a light blue, blue, or red color erase pencil, depending on the color scheme of the drawing. I also want to note that you should try not to press too hard when transferring your image. The main reason you want to go from one direction is to avoid smudging. Sometimes ink doesn't dry as quickly as we want it to, so moving in the opposite direction prevents that. For example, if you're right-handed, start from the top left and move to the bottom right to avoid smudging. If you're left-handed, start from the top right and move to the bottom left. You can also add a scrap piece of paper underneath your hand to further prevent any smudging. It is easier to control your line art when you draw towards yourself. Drawing away from your body gives you less control the farther you go. I'm not saying it's impossible, but for more control, draw towards yourself. Keeping in mind the previous tip, rotating the page allows you to draw towards yourself. Again, this will give you more control over your drawing and allow you to make the best line possible. In my speed paints, when I start the line art, you will often see me detach the drawing from my desk for this very reason. I've tried to apply line art when an image was still taped down to a flat surface, and I had to contort my arm to get into an angle that would allow me to draw towards myself. Save yourself the trouble and just rotate the paper, not your body. For smooth line art, you want to aim to use one stroke, especially for something that you want to look smooth, like hair. Unless you are intentionally making small sketching strokes for something like fur or stubble, trying to achieve smooth line art with multiple lines is very difficult. You also run the risk of your lines not matching up, leading to messier line art. When creating your line art, take your time. Try not to rush, since this can make your line art appear messy or cause overlapping lines if you're not careful. Go at a moderate pace where you can make a confident stroke, not a rushed one. At first, it may look shaky as you get used to inking, but over time it will get better as you become more confident in making strokes. Adding line variants to your line art can make it look more dynamic and interesting. There are a few ways of doing this. First, you can use a brush pen, which will add line weight to your art automatically, depending on how much pressure you use. Another way is to line your entire drawing with a fine liner. Then, after it's dried, go back and add line weight in the areas you want to emphasize. I usually add them to corners or places where things overlap. Sometimes mistakes just can't be helped, but that doesn't mean you should start over. You can take it as a challenge and incorporate it into the artwork. When I'm making line art, it's never perfect. Usually I mess up on lining the hair or make the eyelashes too thick on one side. Sometimes I even make a line that isn't supposed to be there. In these instances, I try to go with the flow and adjust my drawing to incorporate the mistake. Or I just make the line really thick and make it feel intentional. With time and practice, you will get better at line art. Don't feel discouraged if it didn't turn out the way you wanted the first time. Just keep going and you will improve. Next week, I'll have a video out on how to improve your art. So if you're interested in that, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you're notified of when that comes out. I hope you found these tips useful or helpful in any way. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up and leave a comment down below telling me what kind of tutorials you want to see in the future. So with that, I want to thank you guys so much for joining me today. Keep drawing, keep creating, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!